The Father of Manifestation experiences hidden denials. The Father of Manifestation has been mentally calling for these beings to make themselves known to him, so that he could know if they really were, and if so, what they were. One time, when he sat down to rest from his healing work with the shadow beings, something touched his hand and was gone before he could see it. When he looked at his hand, it appeared as though a hole had been torn in it. He recoiled in horror that what the mother had been saying might be true after all. He had hesitated to think that it could be true that they were beings as terrible as she had described, but it now seemed entirely possible that she was right. The Father of Manifestation looked back at his hand as if he needed to reassure himself that what he thought had happened had actually happened. When he looked again, the hole was not there. He questioned, then, whether he had this experience or whether he had imagined it. He feared that the power of suggestion was strong and that his will to try to find out by experiencing this again was weak. He feared having it be true, that this had happened to him in case he really was responsible for it. He did not want to have to help these spirits if it meant that he was going to be devoured in the process. The Father of Manifestation was horrified even further to realize that he had been both repulsed and fascinated by what had happened to him. He wondered if the mother felt this way, and if this might be why he didn't quite believe her when she said that she hated being attacked by unseen things in the darkness. The Father of Manifestation made immediate judgments that his repulsion was unloving and that his fascination was a perversion. He repulsed himself that he could be fascinated by such an occurrence. He took his head in disbelief and moved to resume his healing efforts with the shadow beings, but he could not help trying to imagine what was going on in the darkness. Indigo spoke to him and said, "Quit trying to imagine and just look with your internal eye." The Father of Manifestation felt embarrassed that he had not thought of this earlier, and then realized that he had already looked at the time the mother had first told him about the creatures in the darkness. But he had been unsure as to whether he had seen reality or the mother's suggestions. He had hoped these things were only the mother's imagination, but now it seemed that he was also involved, if only in his imagination. Already his mind had begun to deny his experience because it seemed so fantastic to him. He wondered how he could know if it was reality or not, but he decided that he was going to have to look again. When he looked, he saw the same things he had seen the first time. He saw many perverted and twisted forms, as though they were the wreckage and discard of what he had been creating. He saw some forms that appeared to have several different discarded parts stuck together, as though these parts were trying to do one thing. The forms he saw had the basics of the other forms he had seen, but everything was so distorted that it appeared monstrous to him. These creatures appeared grotesque in the extreme, almost defying description. Eyes very small or huge and distorted, noses extended strangely or smashed in upon them, gaping mouths, intimidating fangs, and hair that made his hands recoil. Slobbering, drooling, and snot-smeared, some of these creatures lumbered about in ill-conceived forms that could barely bend and move, while others flew and darted so fast that the Father of Manifestation could not catch the details of their beakish faces and scathing, beating, scraping wings. As he looked, he heard their noises of grunting, growling, snarling, cackling, and wailing. Their sounds were as discordant in his ears as their smells were repugnant in his nose. The Father of Manifestation winced in fear that he might have been experimenting with form and had inadvertently caused this. He retched with nausea over what the implications of this might be. He grew cold with guilt and shook with grief that loving intent had done no better than his. He fell over when he stood, not even knowing what had happened to him. He hoped that what he saw was still only an internal reality, but feared that even if it was, he did not know how to stop it from manifesting. Many of the creatures he saw appeared to be missing parts or have missing parts of parts. Some were tearing at one another, some had ganged up to tear other parts. When creatures standing around were not involved, they did nothing to help the ones that were. The father of manifestation was so horrified he felt he was in the grips of a nightmare he could not escape. He felt himself being shaken as though the creatures had grabbed him. He fought with them and felt that he must get them away from him or he would not survive. He lashed out with all the strength he had and heard the mother screaming. He struggled to see her in the darkness, frightened that they had gotten a hold of her because he had left her alone. He struggled to get to his feet, thinking to look after the mother, but he could not move. The spirits around him were holding him down. He began to hear his name being called over and over. It sounded like the spirits he had been trying to heal. He opened his eyes and only then remembered it was his internal eye he had been experiencing. The mother ran to him, then asking him what was wrong. He could see that she was hurt, and he wondered if it meant that she really had been in that reality he had been seeing. When he asked her what was wrong, she began to cry. The other spirits present told him that the mother had run to him when he fell down and that he had struck her and thrown her off. They said they were holding him down because they were not sure what he was going to do. The father of manifestation became frightened that his internal reality became so real that he could not tell the difference between them and his external experiences. At other times he had found this pleasant, but not now. He wondered if the mother was going to forgive him or not. In a flash, the mother knew what had happened to the father of manifestation. She had thought it was not possible to know these realities without going into them the way she had done, but now she felt internal experiences could be just as strong. The mother could not bear to see the father of manifestation in such a state of pain, fear, and guilt. She tried to comfort him and lead him away from what he had experienced by focusing on the realities around them. She thought it was the loving, stabilizing thing to do, but she was also trembling with the same fears the father of manifestation had about the reality he had seen in the darkness. The fear was great in both of them, or the father of manifestation would not have allowed her to lead his attention away from it the way that she did. Their fear was so great that they cooperated in moving away from it and thus gaped themselves from terror that really needed to move there. Their survival instincts had told them that they had to get out of there, and they had to, but they also needed to move all the emotions involved. Even though they denied the depths of their terror, the mother and the father of manifestation remained frightened. They felt responsible, and they had intent to try to help these creatures, but they were also frightened about going to them and frightened about coming to me with their experience. The father of manifestation wondered if he was solely responsible for this or not, and he feared the implication if he was. He wondered if these beings were the unintended side effects of his creative expression. He wondered if he was putting the mother in danger for these beings when he took her into the darkness to make love. He wondered if the experiences he had were real or not, reminding himself that his light had never shown him such things when he actually was out in the darkness. He was not sure what it meant if he had imagined all of this, and he was very frightened about what it means if he really had experienced all of this. The Father of Manifestation was not overtly expressing these fears, but he was torturing himself internally with them so much that he lost interest in sex. If this was a reality that had already manifested itself, he feared I was more right to ask him to hold back from lovemaking than he had at first thought. If it was a reality about to manifest, he was also afraid to make love. He was deeply troubled, so deeply troubled that the mother no longer aroused him. The Father of Manifestation ignored the mother as much as he could because he did not want to risk sexual involvement with her. He became frightened that he did not love her anymore and that he might be blaming her for the creatures in the darkness. She felt responsible because she felt she had emerged them. She had felt these things biting and striking her as they left. They had felt hatred towards them when they did this, but she also feared that they did it because they hated her. She feared that these things blamed her for their problems, and she also had fear that she was somehow the cause. Even though the Father of Manifestation had lost interest in sex, he still had body surges. After a period of time, they built up again. He held himself back as much as he could, and when he did make love, he chose partners from among the other spirits, hoping they did not have the power to emerge anything. The many fears he held within himself were reflected to him by these partners, though, and the Father of Manifestation found himself increasingly unable to attain sexual satisfaction. As his sexual frustrations grew, the pressure from his held emotions grew also. For a time, the mother was glad that the Father of Manifestations was no longer making her feel pressured sexually. She had feared displeasing me by making love with him, and she had feared displeasing him by saying no. For a period of time, we all felt relief from sexual pressure, and many times I wished the mother had left well enough alone. The mother seduces the Father of Manifestation. The mother did ignore the situation as long as she could, but she had a growing jealousy over the partners the Father of Manifestation was having. As much as she was concerned about his sexual problems, she was also glad he had not been able to find satisfaction with another. She still had love for him, and hoping he still had love for her, she decided she would try to seduce him. She gave the excuse that the Father of Manifestation could not be unhappy sexually and still generate his light. Of course, everything omitted here in the terms of the feelings involved caused me to question the mother's motives. Even though I later realized that she was right, I was furious with her at the time. In my view, the temptress in her came out. The mother had decided to approach the subject of the darkness and focus on the positive this time. She wanted to convey to the Father of Manifestation that what he had seen that had upset him so much was only a small portion of the reality that was there. She wanted to tell him about the love she had for the quiet restfulness of the darkness, and of her love for both the feeling of privacy and the feeling of openness to the vastness of space that the darkness gave her. In the darkness, the mother did not feel as isolated from the distant planets and stars as she often did when they disappeared in the light and in the darkness. She did not feel as ashamed of herself. She did not want to mention that the terror of the darkness never left her, and that not knowing what she would find out there made it exciting. She feared these feelings in her because she did not like the pain of unpleasant findings. The mother put on what was, in her opinion, the best look she had left. You might liken it to a revealing black dress with chiffon veils. She moved slowly towards the Father of Manifestation, at first trying to act like she was just moving around rather than that she was approaching him. Her movements were gently swirling ones that seemed designed to be as alluring as possible. When she did draw near him, her motions allowed her dark veils to touch him, as if they were not by design. Her swirling motions brushed him like a soft feather on skin. Her eyes peered mysteriously out at him from her veils, as though calling for him to respond to her. The Father of Manifestation gave no outward sign of response. He sat motionless in the fear that response meant trouble for both of them. The mother drew closer to him as though she wanted to talk but didn't know how to approach the subject with words. The father of manifestation could feel the warmth of her breath upon him along with the stirring coolness of the feathery touch of her veils. He began to feel titillated, but still, he gave no sign outwardly. The mother felt that he was responding anyway, and she began to tingle in her lower chakras. Her breathing intensified. Heat began radiating from within her, cooled by the swirling of her veils. The father of manifestation could not look at her for fear of what he might see in her eyes. He thought she might be laughing at him and challenging him to respond. The mother did laugh then from deep within her and began a seductive swirling dance in which she allowed her veils to slip apart in places, revealing the golden glow of her being within them. The mother also began to sing of how much she loved the peace and quietude of the darkness, and how much she loved to feel the heat of the day cooled by the gentle breezes of the night. Then she began to sing of how much she longed to lie in the arms of her lover and feel his warmth in the coolness of the starry night. She hesitated somewhat as though she was a little breathless, and then she sang of how she missed the passionate fire of her lover, how she longed to take him in her arms and stroke him and try to heal his pain and misery as he had done for so many others. She hesitated to touch the father of manifestation, and her hands trembled, but she leaned close to him, still breathless in the fear of what his response might be. She wanted to grab him and pull him down upon her, but instead she stood quivering before him, gently rubbing herself against his body almost as though she was not really touching him. The father of manifestation was hesitant to make love, but soon he could not help himself. He grew hard in response to her softness and pressed himself against her enough to let her know that his response was there. The mother frightened herself in this moment because she could not ignore the fear that her passionate desire was in opposition to me. Her passion nearly evaporated in that moment. The father of manifestation feared it was because of his response, but each tried not to let the other know that they had experienced in that moment. They each overrode their fear in favor of the intense passion they knew they had been holding back for so long. The father of manifestation pulled the mother gently down upon him and tried to help both of them recover from their fright by rubbing his hands up and down her body. He began kissing the mother and caressing her hair. His light mingled with hers. It gave her the effect of many-hued sunset, their hair, like beams of setting sun, fading off into a surrounding dark sky, glistening in the many stars of night.